Chapter 9, Falling in Love. After 2 wonderful years at Providence, I went on to Harvard to complete my degree in psychology. I was especially interested in working with children who had learning difficulties. As an assistant to a famous doctor, I learned that many young children who seem to be backward are not really backward at all. At least they can achieve more than has been suspected. Some may even catch up and overtake the progress of other children. There was one little girl who was making no progress at all at school, and her parents and teachers thought she was just dumb. The doctor and I discovered that she was partially deaf. Her deafness was the cause of her slow progress. It was not that she did not understand what her teachers and parents were saying. She didn't hear what they were saying. As soon as this child was fitted with a hearing aid, she caught on quickly and soon moved to the head of the class. There are so many children with physical disabilities that retard their mental development simply because adults do not recognize the problem. Being blind helped me to understand, and I was happy to be able to help some of the children we worked with lead normal lives. Although I was fascinated by the idea of making psychology my career, I was even more attracted by another career possibility. I had grown to love music passionately. I started composing my own songs, and just for fun, I began to play and sing in the lounge of Lowell House at Harvard. The students encouraged my performances, and I enjoyed their applause. I began to write more and more songs. The melody of a new tune or the words of a song often came to me in the still of the night. I kept a tape recorder beside my bed, and I dictated the words or hummed the tune, as the case might be, into the recorder. The next morning, I would ask a friend to transcribe the tune into written form. When the summer vacation came around, my dad, who owned several clubs, helped me get an audition at a new club called Deacon's Perch on the Cape Cod coast. The audition went well. I was taken on as an entertainer. It was exciting to earn money by doing something I so thoroughly enjoyed, and I was one step closer to that old dream of becoming a wandering minstrel. Most of the people who came to the club were from the yachts and cruisers anchored off the coast. During the day, I was always invited to go sailing or water skiing. Then at night, I would go back to the club to play and sing. During intermissions, I talked to the customers. I met a lot of interesting people that way. One evening, when I took a break from my playing and weaved my way among the tables, a cheerful voice said, "Congratulations, we loved your singing." "Thanks a lot," I replied. The girl said, "Wouldn't you like to sit with us for a moment? My name is Connie, and my friend's name is Patty. We're sophomores at the University of Arizona, and we have summer jobs as waitresses at the Wheelhouse." The Wheelhouse was a well-known restaurant not far from Deacon's Perch. I joined them and asked, "Why don't we have supper together after the club closes?" Connie said, "I'm afraid we can't. We are on the early shift at the restaurant, and we'll have to get some sleep. Somebody told us that the music here was great. That's why we're here." The other girl put out her hand and spoke for the first time. She asked rather shyly, "Are you really blind?" I laughed and replied, "How else do you think I could tell that you are a blonde, that you're 5 feet 5 inches tall, and that you weigh 115 pounds? 117 pounds, laughed Patty. I didn't tell Patty that almost as soon as a person shakes my hand, I can guess his or her weight, and fairly accurately. Obviously, if a hand is pudgy and the body is short, the person is sure to be plump at least. I knew that Patty was about average height because as soon as she spoke, I knew how high her mouth was above the table. From her handshake, I knew that she was neither fat nor thin. And I'm usually right in guessing the color of a person's hair. Blondes and brunettes seem to have different tonal qualities in their voices. Of course, Connie and Patty were really puzzled and weren't quite sure that I was totally blind. It was fun to keep them guessing for a while. Before I returned to the stage, the 2 girls invited me to join them for a beach picnic the following day. "We'll bring the chicken," said Connie, "and we'll pick you up in the Beast." "What's the Beast?" I asked. "Is it a horse, an elephant, or a camel?" "It's our car," explained Connie. "We bought it for $80. It won't go in reverse, and the starter doesn't work." Next day at about noon, I heard a car horn outside the room I had rented. I went outside to investigate and found Patty sitting in their very old car. "Hi," called Patty. "The engine stopped, so do you mind pushing to get the beast started?" "Where's Connie?" I asked with a slight tinge of disappointment in my voice. I hoped it wasn't apparent. "Afraid she couldn't come," said Patty. "Her parents arrived unexpectedly. Do you mind having a picnic with me?" I got behind the beast and started to push. Eventually, the motor fired. Breathless and sweating, I jumped in beside Patty. "Would you like me to drive?" I asked. Patty laughed, and her laughter was musical and full of fun, full of life. I was suddenly glad that Connie had not been able to come. We found a quiet place on the beach and spread a blanket on the sand. Patty dropped the chicken in the sand, and when I bit into a drumstick, I chipped a tooth. "I hope you're going to pay my dentist bill," I said, pretending to be cross. After we had finished lunch, Patty pulled me to my feet and said she wanted to walk. The sun was warm, and the only sounds were from the seagulls and the small waves lapping at the shoreline. It suddenly seemed to me that we were the only people in the world. We walked and we talked. I spoke about my own childhood and how my parents and relatives had always wanted to protect me, how they seemed determined to keep me from leading a normal life. But even as a boy, I wanted to do all the things that other boys did: climb trees, toboggan in winter, surf and sail in the summer. I was always unhappy about not being able to catch a ball, and I've often asked myself, why was I blind? Why me? I still don't know the answer. Patty was silent for a while. Then she said unexpectedly, "Perhaps there is a reason. There is a reason for almost everything." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I'm not quite sure," said Patty, "but you seem to have done so many things that people with sight have never attempted to do. Maybe you can inspire many people who think they have problems." She squeezed my hand and laughed happily. "I think you are wonderful. Certainly you inspire me. When I heard you singing last night, I felt sure that I was listening to someone who could become a famous artist." Patty talked quietly and with such positive conviction that I felt really good. I had never met anyone like her before. She talked of God, and she said she believed that God had a plan for everyone, including me. She said, "I guess you've got to have faith." "Faith is a pretty hard thing to have when you're blind," I replied. "Faith is rather like love. You either have it or you haven't," said Patty. Then she went on to tell me of her own childhood and how sickly she had been, even critically ill when she was a small child. The doctor had told her parents that if they wanted her to grow up, they would have to move from the cold winters of Michigan to the dry Arizona desert. "My dad had a successful business which he had built up himself," said Patty, "but Dad put my life before security and everything else. He sold his business and moved to Tucson, Arizona, where he had to start all over again. We had very little money, but that didn't worry Dad because my health improved and I became strong again. Then Dad's new business began to grow. I guess you could call that faith." We walked and talked for such a long time that we had not realized how late it was. Patty suddenly said, "I wish you could see the beautiful sunset. It doesn't mean much to you if I talk about red and orange clouds, does it? How do you see a sunset?" I thought about the question for a moment and then said, "For me, a sunset is like taking 1,000 pieces of glass of different shapes and letting them fall to form their own patterns. A sunset is like closing the day with happiness." "That's beautiful," exclaimed Patty. "Well, one of the advantages of being blind," I said, "is that I don't see ugly things in the same way that you do. I don't see factories spewing their pollution into the air, or junkyards, or litter in the streets and parks. As a matter of fact, I've never seen an ugly person. When a sighted person says, 'Oh, he's ugly,' or 'she's pretty,' I realize that I can't make a visual interpretation that way. I can't make quick judgments of people. I have to concentrate more on everyone I meet. I have to interpret them with my senses of touch and smell and sound. I form my opinions of people more slowly, I guess." Patty said, "But there must be some things you don't like." "Oh, sure," I replied. "I hate the smell of skunks, and I hate the sound of an ambulance. An ambulance siren seems to scream of pain and fear, and I've met many people whom I don't get along with, but not because of the way they look. Old people with wrinkles or deformed people can be very beautiful people to me. I don't see their leathery skins and twisted limbs. I see inside them. An old voice often means experience and wisdom and tolerance. A rough hand tells me someone has worked hard. Can you tell a lot from a handshake? Asked Patty. Much more than you can guess, I said. Haven't you ever noticed that a person who just gives you a fingertip handshake is not very interested in you? But the handshake of a friend, that's quite different. When most people shake hands, they look at the expression on a person's face. But the face can be a mask. People don't realize how much they say when they shake hands. How else do you judge a person when you first meet? Asked Patty. You can tell a great deal from the way a person walks, I said. If I hear heavy, slow footsteps, I know that the walker is older or tired or fed up. If the footsteps are brisk and firm, then I know that the walker knows where he is going or is excited about something. What about my footsteps? Asked Patty. You don't walk, you dance, I replied. That means you must be very happy. I don't think I've ever been happier, she laughed. Nor I said, and gave her a hug. We stopped walking and sat for a while on some rocks. Then we felt around in the pools of water for shells and sea urchins. I told Patty how much I loved to feel living things like leaves and flowers, the bark of trees, the fur of a dog, the flank of a horse. And the silk of your hair, I said. It's the silkiest hair I have ever touched. We were both silent for a while, and the air was charged with feeling. Both of us knew what was happening. We were falling in love. It was the strangest feeling. There was an ache in my heart, and the feeling in my stomach was like the one I had the first time I skydived. Then Patty broke the silence. She said, I only wish we had met earlier. Then we could have had the whole summer ahead of us, but I have to fly back to Arizona tomorrow. My heart sank. I wonder if we'll ever meet again, I said sadly. Patty replied quickly, You could try having faith. I believe that if we are meant to meet again, we will meet again. Let's not think about tomorrow. The sun has not quite gone down. Let's think about today. What about a swim? I suggested. Lovely, she exclaimed, and there's no one else on the beach. We can pretend we are on our own tropical island. See if you can catch me. Patty started to run down the beach. I had to listen for her footsteps, and then I chased her. When I caught her, I carried her into the sea. She was a strong swimmer, and we swam together far out. Patty swam away from me and then shouted, Now see if you can catch me. I listened, but I couldn't hear her. I guessed she had ducked under the surface. I put my head below the surface, then I could distinctly hear bubbles. I swam toward the bubbles, and Patty was surprised when I grabbed her ankle. But how did you know? She asked. Because I used my ears for eyes, I laughed. That night when Patty arrived at the club, I sang one of my own songs. It was titled, Every Time I Fall in Love, I Fall in Love with You. I put real feeling into the words that night, and the audience responded with long applause. I guessed that Patty knew I was singing especially for her. One of the visitors at the club was a talent scout for the Johnny Carson show. When I took a break, this man came over to see me. He said, You sang that song as if you're really in love. Then he invited me to sing it on the Johnny Carson show. I was waiting for Patty to come for me and take me to her table. I was eager to tell her about the invitation to appear on television with Johnny Carson. I was puzzled that she hadn't yet come. Then one of the waiters, who was a friend of mine, tapped me on the shoulder and said, A young lady asked me to give you this note. Is it written in Braille? I asked. No. Then you'd better read it to me, I said. The waiter read the note, which was written on a paper napkin. The note read, I'm afraid I would cry if I said goodbye to you. I love you. Have faith that we'll meet again. Patty. Suddenly, I felt terribly empty and lonely. At first, I was bitterly disappointed that Patty had not said goodbye to me. I even began to think that she didn't want to see me again because I was blind. The excitement of being invited to appear on the Johnny Carson show began to fade. What I wanted more than anything else in the world was to be with Patty. I wanted to hear her laughter, which sounded more like music to me than any song. Then, as I sat there, lonely and despondent, I remembered Patty's words, "Have faith that we'll meet again." I felt better. I went back to the piano.